close your eyes and relax. In the shadows, things are hiding that are better left unseen. Tonight, I'll tell you a story that will take you to a place where reality and fear intertwine. But before we begin, make sure no one is watching. And if you like what you hear, don't forget to give a like. It helps me keep creating new dark tales for you. Leave a comment telling us where you're listening from and which story has been the scariest for you. And now, let's begin. You blinked. I always made coffee at 6:12 p.m. sharp. Never earlier, never later. It wasn't a rule, not really. Just a rhythm I fell into after the divorce. Something small and harmless to keep the hours from unraveling. The apartment was too quiet, like always. The kind of quiet that presses on your ears until you start hearing things that aren't there. Water ticking through the pipes, floorboards shifting without cause. Outside, the streetlight buzzed faintly. A single moth threw itself against the glass every few seconds, frantic and mindless. I lived on the second floor of a brick walk-up on Barrow Street, tucked between a dry cleaner's and a vape shop that closed too late. The walls were that yellowed beige landlords think is warm. Nothing hung on them. I'd meant to put up some prints, black and white ones, tasteful, but I never got around to it. Somehow, empty walls started to feel right, like they were watching back. The coffee machine coughed to life. I leaned on the counter, rubbing my thumb over a chip in the laminate. A low hum came from the fridge. The air was dry and smelled faintly of burnt dust from the baseboard heater. I hadn't spoken out loud all day. When the machine let out its final hiss, I poured the coffee into my chipped black mug, the one with the faded "World's Okayest Programmer" text, and stared out the kitchen window. The street below was empty. No cars, no people, just the pale flicker of that one broken light, blinking like a slow heartbeat. That's when I noticed it. A figure, not walking, not moving, just standing on the sidewalk across the street, directly beneath the flickering bulb. I squinted, too far to make out a face. No umbrella, no coat, just stillness, arms at their sides, head tilted slightly, as if they were listening, not to traffic, not to the rain, to me. I stepped back from the window, not out of fear, not exactly, just a sudden visceral sense that I'd been mistaken. This wasn't someone outside, it was someone waiting. And the worst part? Somewhere deep in my gut, in that low animal part of the brain we pretend we've outgrown. I recognized them, even though I knew I'd never seen them before. I turned away from the window and told myself it was nothing. Just some poor bastard waiting for an Uber in the wrong zip code. Maybe high, maybe lost. I'd seen weirder things in this city. Half-naked guys arguing with payphones that hadn't worked since 2007. A statue of a clown, someone chained to a bike rack, and left for 3 weeks. Still, I didn't finish my coffee right away. I carried the mug to my desk, booted up the laptop. Fan kicked on louder than usual. Maybe the poor thing was choking on dust again. The screen stayed black for a second longer than I liked, before flickering to life. Desktop icons loaded slowly, like they were being dragged up from underwater. Something buzzed. Not my phone, it was face down, silent, no notifications. The buzz came again, low, rhythmic. I paused, trying to place it. The fridge, number the heater, wrong tone. It had a mechanical beat, like an old electric toothbrush or a broken air vent fan. I got up, followed it to the hallway, then the bathroom. Nothing. Until I turned and spotted the light fixture in the ceiling. The bulb was pulsing, just barely. A low, stuttering glow, almost imperceptible, like it was breathing. I stood there watching it for a while, holding my breath. Tried the switch. Office on. Same pulse. Dimensions. Faint. Almost tired. I made a mental note to check the breaker later. Back in the kitchen, the moth was gone. Left a little smear on the glass where it had finally broken itself. I wiped it off with the sleeve of my hoodie, sat back down. The laptop screen blinked once, just a blink, like a refresh. Then the volume icon in the corner disappeared. Not muted, gone, just missing. I opened settings. Everything else was normal. No driver error, no update prompts. I even played a test sound. It worked fine. It was probably nothing. Glitch. That's the thing about living alone. You start noticing all the tiny things a roommate or a partner would just explain away for you. The stray sound, the missing icon, the fridge buzzing like a wasp in a jar. And without anyone to say, don't worry, it's just the bulb. The silence fills in the blanks. But I wasn't worried. Not yet. It happened again the next night. Same time, 6:12. This time, I didn't make coffee. I thought about making it, stood by the machine, fingers twitching near the button, but the urge passed, like someone had pressed pause on the part of my brain that cared. Instead, I opened the fridge, stared at the half-empty shelves for too long, and shut the door without taking anything. The hallway light still pulsed, still breathing. I went to my desk to check email, normal junk, a bill, an invite to a webinar I never signed up for, but then I saw it in the calendar widget, just above the clock. Coffee, 6:12 p.m. Not an alert, not a scheduled event, just text, gray and small, sitting there like it had always been part of the UI. I clicked it. Nothing opened. I hovered. Nothing responded. I took a screenshot and opened Paint to paste it in. But the clipboard was empty. That was the first time I felt it. Not fear, not fully. Just this misalignment. Like hearing your own voice echoed wrong in a bad recording. Like looking into a mirror and catching something a second too slow. I opened my contacts, out of habit. Scrolled down. A few old names. Ex-co-workers. My sister, who I hadn't called in weeks. And then at the bottom, a new entry. No icon, just the name. M.E. I tapped it. No number, no email. Just a blank profile, created at 6:12 p.m. I deleted it. It came back. Not right away. I waited 5 minutes, reopened the app. There it was again. M.E. I checked my reflection in the darkened screen of the laptop. Same face, same stubble. But the eyes looked off, like I'd just missed something and couldn't rewind. I shut the lid, sat in the dark. Streetlight outside kept flickering, but the figure wasn't there tonight. Just the light, blinking slow and tired, like it was waiting for me to blink back. I didn't sleep. The bedroom felt wrong, too warm, like someone had been lying in the bed before me. The sheets had a weight to them I didn't recognize. I left the light on. At some point around 3, I moved back to the couch. When I opened my eyes again, the laptop was on. I knew I'd shut it. I remember the sound of the lid clicking shut. But now the screen was glowing faintly, white and waiting. No password prompt, just an open window, a text file, untitled. It said, "You blinked." That's all. Just 2 words. I stared at it for a full minute before moving. Didn't touch the trackpad, just watched. It didn't change. I closed the file, shut the lid. This time I unplugged it, went to the bathroom, washed my face. The mirror was fogged, but the sink hadn't been running. And then I saw the word, not written, not scratched, formed, in the steam on the glass, like breath had drawn it. M.E. Same fontless word as the contact, same dead weight. I wiped it clean, hard, opened the door to clear the air. My hands were shaking, just slightly. In the hallway, the light fixture was off. For the first time in weeks, not pulsing, dead. I should have felt relief. Instead, my chest tightened. In the silence, I heard something, softer than sound. A pressure, like someone was standing behind me. Too close, not breathing. I turned. Nothing. I went back into the living room. The window was open, wide. I never opened it. The latch was turned cleanly. No wind, no noise outside. Just the street light, flickering like a dying eye. And the alley, empty. Except it wasn't. In the alley at the very edge of the light, there was a shape. Not a person, not really. Too tall, too still. Its head tilted, like it was trying to hear me through the glass. I froze. Phone in hand, I took a photo without thinking. Flash lit the room white. When I looked down to check the photo, the gallery was empty. Every photo, every file, gone, except one, a new folder, labeled ME. I left the next morning. Didn't pack, just walked out with my wallet and jacket, still wearing yesterday's clothes. I turned off the phone, pulled the SIM, left it on the kitchen counter, face down. The window stayed shut behind me, but I couldn't tell if that meant anything. Rented a car 2 towns over, paid cash, picked a city I hadn't visited in years, 6 hours south, nothing special. Beige motels, gas stations with half-lit signs, identical intersections. Checked into a room under a fake name, no calls, no internet. Sat on the edge of the bed and tried to breathe like a normal person. For almost a full day, nothing happened. The silence made me hopeful, or stupid. The motel TV was one of those old off-brand things. Tiny screen, thick plastic shell, remote taped together. I turned it on out of habit, let it hum in the background. Some nature documentary. Snow leopards, maybe. Then the camera cut to a rocky ledge, and a voice said, "You blinked." Same tone, same cold rhythm. I shut the TV off, left it unplugged. Still that night, when I finally tried to sleep, I woke up at 6:12. No alarm, just new. The room was quiet, but in the corner, on the floor, where I dumped the rental keys, was a paper card. Hotel stationery. I hadn't touched it. Someone had written a word in pencil, just one. Here. I booked a second room in another building, set up a motion cam on my laptop, aimed at the door, sat up, watching the feed. At 6:12, the screen glitched once, just a single frame, a jump. I rewound. There was a shadow in that frame, something tall, right behind me, between me and the window. I checked the room in silence. Nothing. But the shadow wasn't behind me when it appeared. It was inside mine, mimicking it, leaning with me, moving when I moved. Except in the frame, I never moved. I just sat perfectly still, and it didn't. That's when I knew. It's not following me. It's with me. Wherever I go, it's already there, waiting for me to blink. I checked out before dawn. Didn't speak to anyone. Drove west until the sun came up behind me, until the highway blurred, until I couldn't feel my hands on the wheel. Pulled into a rest stop. Bathroom lights flickered overhead, too bright, too quiet. Inside, above the sink, a mirror. Scratched into the glass, shallow but deliberate. Turn around. I didn't. I just stood there. And behind me, something breathed. Tracked. What begins as a series of strange coincidences soon spirals into something far worse. Elliot thinks he's just having a breakdown, until a name he hasn't used in years resurfaces, followed by cryptic notes and unsettling encounters. Desperate to escape the unseen force stalking him, he runs, hoping for safety in another city. But the presence follows, lurking closer than ever. There's no place left to hide, no way to outrun it. And as the walls close in, Elliot realizes the truth. Whatever is after him isn't going anywhere. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the apartment. Not even the neighbors were arguing tonight, which was rare. I sat on the edge of the couch, still in my work clothes. A cheap suit gone soft at the elbows, sleeves rolled halfway up my forearms, and a red wine stain on the knee that had darkened into something almost respectable. The room smelled faintly of reheated Chinese takeout and the ghost of something fried 2 days ago. I hadn't bothered with the overhead lights. The glow from the street lamp outside bled through the blinds in slanted lines, striping the floor and my coffee table with pale orange. I held a chipped mug of lukewarm coffee in both hands, letting the ceramic warm my fingers. It was too late for caffeine, but the quiet made me restless. There was something strange about silence when it stretched this long. It started to feel like it was watching you. The TV was off, my phone face down on the table, and I hadn't checked my messages in over a day. I didn't want to know what I was missing, or who I was disappointing. Outside, a siren howled far off, bending around buildings, never getting closer. I stared at the empty chair across from me, like I was expecting someone to fill it. But there was no one. No one was coming. The walls were too thin, the couch too worn, the air too still. I should have done the dishes, or folded the laundry, or something, but instead I just sat there. The apartment was small, a single-bedroom rental on the 3rd floor of a brick building that used to be a hotel. The hallway smelled like bleach and something damp. My neighbors rotated every few months, leaving behind furniture I could hear being dragged around at all hours. I never asked names, never offered mine. I don't know when I first noticed the scratching. It was soft at first, like paper sliding against paper. I thought it was the wind, maybe a branch against the window, but there are no trees outside, just the alley and the brick wall of the building next door. I sat still, holding my breath. The sound came again, closer now, inside, somewhere behind the wall. Slow, steady, scratching, and then it stopped. I shifted in my seat, glancing around the room, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest that had started to form. The silence was back, but it felt different now. There was something about the stillness, a subtle shift in the air, like the room had grown just a bit smaller. I tried to shake it off. It was late. I was tired. The coffee had gone cold, so I set the mug down with a quiet thud on the coffee table and rubbed my eyes. That's when I noticed the TV. It had switched on by itself. I blinked, surprised. The remote was still on the table where I'd left it, and the screen was static, a blurry sea of black and white fuzz. I didn't even remember pressing the power button, but I could have. Maybe I had, and I just forgot. It wasn't like I'd had any particularly important thoughts in the past hour. I got up slowly, walked over and jabbed the power button on the remote, but the screen didn't change. The static swirled for a second before settling back into its static hum. I muttered to myself, something about faulty wiring or a glitch, and grabbed the remote again, this time hitting the volume button. The sound came on, a low buzz, then a sudden, sharp crackle. I winced and turned it off manually this time, flicking the switch on the side of the set. The TV blinked off, leaving me in the dim orange glow of the streetlight. I stood there for a moment, considering the room. The hum of the refrigerator was back, and that familiar siren in the distance continued to echo, but everything else seemed still. I glanced over at the phone, which had been face down on the table. It buzzed, once, twice, then it stopped. I sighed, walking over and picking it up. A text from an unknown number. "Are you alone?" I frowned, staring at the screen. It was probably just one of those spam numbers trying to get me to click some link or pick up the phone. I almost didn't bother responding, but something about the way it was worded nagged at me. It wasn't a question I was used to. I tapped back a quick, dismissive reply. "Yeah, who's this?" My thumb hovered over the send button. I wasn't even sure why I cared. The last thing I needed was a weird conversation late at night, but something inside me couldn't just ignore it. Not yet. Before I could hit send, the phone buzzed again. This time, it was a single word. "Don't." I stared at the screen, the hairs on the back of my neck starting to rise. But the moment passed. I put the phone down, grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair, and headed for the door. The night felt a little colder, but I wasn't scared. Not yet. The air outside was crisp as I stepped onto the balcony, taking a deep breath, trying to shake the feeling that had settled in my chest. The city lights flickered below me, each one a reminder of the noise I was avoiding. I needed to calm down. Nothing strange had really happened, right? It was just a faulty TV, some weird messages. But then, as I reached into my jacket pocket for my keys, I felt the note there. It wasn't mine. I didn't remember putting it there. I pulled it out and unfolded it. The handwriting was messy, hurried. I froze when I saw the name at the top. Elliot. My name. I stared at it for a long moment, confusion mixing with a cold knot in my stomach. No one called me that anymore. It was a name I hadn't used in years, not since I'd dropped it in favor of my middle name, the one I used at work, with friends, and everyone else. The one I'd signed on every document, every contact, every bill. I looked around, but the balcony was empty, the street below silent. The wind picked up, rattling the window behind me, but nothing else seemed out of place. I unfolded the note further. It was short. "Don't forget where you left it. It's still there." My fingers trembled as I read it again. I hadn't left anything anywhere, at least nothing important. My apartment was clean as far as I remembered. I folded the note back up and shoved it into my pocket. I couldn't deal with this now. But when I went back inside, things seemed off. The chair where I'd been sitting earlier was now slightly out of place, turned just enough that I couldn't have missed it. I was sure I'd left it exactly where it had been. Hadn't I? I walked over and sat down, running a hand over my face. This wasn't real. My mind was playing tricks on me. The phone buzzed again, startling me. I picked it up without thinking, and this time the text was waiting for me. "Check the drawer. Your key's still there." I could feel my heartbeat pick up as I walked toward the small drawer next to the kitchen counter. My fingers fumbled with the handle as I pulled it open. There, in the back, tucked under a stack of receipts, was my old key, the one I had thrown away months ago, after I'd moved in. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath. The key was cold in my palm, heavy with something I couldn't quite name. The world outside was the same. The low hum of the refrigerator, the occasional distant siren. But something inside me had shifted. The world hadn't changed, but I had. And suddenly I wasn't so sure I wanted to know what came next. I stood frozen, staring at the key in my hand, but the sensation didn't go away. It was like something was pressing down on me from all sides. The air thick, heavy, suffocating. I could feel my pulse quicken. The rush of panic I couldn't shake. I turned the key over in my fingers, the cold metal somehow more alien than familiar, when I heard it. A soft, deliberate knock on the door. At first I thought it was the neighbor. Maybe they'd dropped something off or were trying to get my attention about something trivial. But there was something wrong with the knock. It was too slow, too precise, like it was being measured. I froze, holding my breath. The knock came again, a long pause between each tap, followed by the faintest sound of a whisper, too soft for me to make out, but unmistakable in its intent. I set the key down on the counter and moved toward the door, heart pounding in my chest. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it, but nothing added up. The hallway was empty. The building was old, but there was no reason for anyone to be knocking this late, especially in this strange, deliberate way. I slowly opened the door, just a crack, barely enough to see out. Nothing. The hallway was empty, the overhead light flickering slightly, casting long shadows across the walls. The air was still. I stepped back inside, but just as I was about to close the door, I froze again. The note, the one I had shoved in my pocket earlier. It was now sitting on the floor right in front of the door, folded neatly, as if someone had placed it there after I'd walked away. I bent down to pick it up, my breath shallow, but I didn't open it. I couldn't. The weight of it felt wrong somehow, like it didn't belong in my hands. That's when I noticed something. The sound, at first barely perceptible, now louder, clearer. The scratching. It wasn't coming from the walls anymore. It was coming from inside the room, from behind the couch. My legs moved before I could think, pulling me towards it, as if I wasn't in control anymore. The room was colder, the air sharp and thick, clinging to my skin like a second layer. I hesitated for a moment, heart thumping, before I grabbed the edge of the couch and pulled it back. There, in the corner of the floor, was a small, crumpled shape, a dark figure, hunched and impossibly still. I couldn't see it clearly, but I could feel its presence. Something heavy, wrong, watching me. The figure shifted. Then it was gone. The air snapped back to normal, and the room fell eerily quiet. I didn't move. I couldn't. The world outside hadn't changed. The streetlights still casting their familiar orange glow. The sirens still distant. But I knew then, something was inside. Something had been here, moving around me, watching me. And it wasn't finished yet. I didn't waste any time. The moment the figure vanished, I grabbed the phone and slammed it down on the table, pulling the battery out in one swift motion. I couldn't shake the feeling that it had somehow been involved, that it was tracking me, pulling the strings. I left the apartment, locking the door behind me. But something in my gut told me it wouldn't matter. It didn't matter. I knew it didn't. The city was quiet, calm. Nothing had changed. But as I walked down the hallway and out into the street, the weight in my chest didn't lift. I went back to my car. I turned the engine over, the familiar hum of the engine somehow comforting, and headed toward the highway. The tires hummed against the pavement, the low roar of the road stretching out before me. But the calm didn't last. The rearview mirror caught a glimpse of something, a shadow. But when I looked closer, the mirror was empty. I glanced around the car, my hand trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. The road was empty. When I reached the hotel in the neighboring town, I went straight to the front desk and rented a room without hesitation. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed, so I put all the lights on, checked every lock, and set up my camera. The same cameras I'd seen used in other people's investigations, the ones that were supposed to give me a sense of control. I laid in the bed, eyes darting between the shadows and the screen of the monitor, watching the grainy footage of the empty room. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead was the only sound. At first, nothing. Then, the screen flickered. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. The cameras weren't supposed to flicker. They were supposed to be stable, but the picture blurred, then sharpened, revealing the dim corner of the room, the door. I stared at it, but there was nothing. Nothing but the stillness. I shut my eyes and took a deep breath. my mind trying to convince me this was all in my head. But then the buzzing of my phone broke the silence. I glanced at the number. It was blocked. I hesitated, then answered. "Are you running yet?" The voice on the other end asked, cold and distant, as though it had been waiting for this moment. I didn't reply. I knew then. It was already here. It hadn't stopped. It wouldn't stop. The sound of the phone went dead, leaving only the static, filling my ears. I set the phone down slowly. The realization sank in like ice water. It had followed me, and it would follow me wherever I went. I stood in the middle of the room, staring at the screen, my breath shallow, eyes darting between the door and the flickering footage. Then I saw it, in the reflection of the window just behind me. A figure, standing perfectly still. I didn't turn around. The voice came again, this time directly in my ear, as though someone was standing right behind me. "You're not alone." The light overhead buzzed, and everything went dark.